very brief review of the control of heart rate. When we take a look at the graffiti right here, we'll notice that down here, yeah, we've talked about it before. There's an intrinsic conduction system to your heart. There's an SA node, also known as the pacemaker, an AV node, an AV bundle, also known as the bundle of His, two bundle branches, and what's called Purkinje fibers. Now, because cardiac muscle cells have autorhythmicity, and because two cells touching each other will take the faster speed, then the SA node distinguishes itself as having the fastest rhythm, the fastest speed. And so its normal rhythm is about 100 beats per minute. However, we're going to see that 100 beats per minute can be subdued down to about 75. The general story goes like this. The SA node fires a depolarization. The depolarization sweeps between the cardiac muscle cells of the right atrium over to the left atrium, and the two sides contract at approximately the same time. This wave of depolarization comes down to the AV node, which then picks it up like an antenna, picks it up and then transmits it through the AV bundle, the bundle branches, to the Purkinje fibers where it is released. So, the depolarization sweeps across both atria first and stops. Then it is projected to the apex of the heart and it's re-released, and it sweeps from the bottom to the top. In this story right here, the atrioventricular septum is extremely important because it's the insulating wall that kept the atrial depolarization from sweeping down, and it's that insulating wall that kept the ventricular depolarization from sweeping back up and over the atria. So it helped to stop this one from going too far down, and it stopped this one from going too far up, and it prevented the thing from echoing back and forth all the time. Well, there you got it. The SA node is the pacemaker. However, it can be influenced by your higher brain centers. Well, your brain centers. Here's the brain, and there's the brainstem, and there's the medulla. Now, the medulla inside the brainstem has, sorry about that, it has a series of control centers in it, and here are two, the CAC and the CIC. The CAC stands for the Cardiac Acceleratory Center, and it's part of your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight system, which tends to speed things up in your body, and it tends to use energy, as if muscles could solve your problems. The CIC stands for the Cardiac Inhibitory Center, and it's part of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of your autonomic nervous system. And you might remember that this system right here is called rest or digest. Its attitude is if you slow things down, if you gather energy, that's the better approach. Now, the medulla is deciding, so to speak, whether to influence the CAC or the CIC based upon the chemistry in and around the brain. So the concentration of carbon dioxide and, in respect to that, the pH of cerebrospinal fluid and blood and the blood pressure are all factors that influence the medulla to stimulate either the CAC or the CIC. Now, if the CAC is stimulated, it's sympathetic innervation, and it will send signals down towards the heart. Its main effect will be to increase the force of contraction, FOC, force of contraction of the cardiac muscle, and it will speed up the heart rate. If the CIC is stimulated, its main influence, will be parasympathetic, it will be to decrease the heart rate, a little less diverse. Now, looking down at the heart, how do you get the message down there? Well, the parasympathetic nervous system will use the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, to send its signals down towards the SA node and the AV node. The parasympathetic signals, again, are sort of like putting your foot on the brake of a car. They're going to try to slow down both of these things right here. And again, this is a cranial nerve that's sending the signal. Now, the sympathetic signals are coming through a spinal nerve, and their influence is a bit more widespread. It sends signals to the SA node, the AV node, and to the cardiac muscle tissue, and to the coronary arteries. For the SA node, the AV node, it tends to increase the heart rate, increases the speed of depolarization. For the cardiac muscle, it increases the force of contraction. And for the coronary arteries right here, it increases vasodilation, which increases the blood flow going to the cardiac muscle. All of this on this side right here is trying to get your heart to work better, to work faster, to be more efficient. So the sympathetic nervous system is like stepping on the gas pedal, trying to speed your car up. The parasympathetic is like stepping on the brakes, trying to slow it down. And ironically, this is sort of like driving through rush hour traffic in Dallas. Sometimes your foot's on the brake and on the gas at the same time, and you're just changing the amount of pressure to decide perfectly how fast the car is going to go. Since we're in the neighborhood, let's also say something about vagal tone. Again, remember the normal rate of the SA node is about 100, but under vagus stimulation, it goes down to 75. So that drop is known as vagal tone. Also remember that if there is something coming from an unusual spot, it's called ectopic, out of position. And so therefore an ectopic focus would represent a signal that's coming from something other than the SA node. And again, that can be very problematic, particularly if there's several ectopic foci. Since we're here, let's go ahead and say something real quick about the cardiac muscle. The cardiac muscle, again, is a very unique kind of a shape. It's not fibers, it's these things that sort of look like puzzle pieces or Lego pieces. They do have intercalated discs connecting to neighboring cells. There is an endomysium, which is part of the fibrous skeleton, that is holding the tissues together a little bit too. The intercalated disc does have desmosomes on it, which act like rivets or buttons and hold the two cell membranes close together. It's found in places where there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of tension here. There's also gap junctions, which are like adjoining doors between two rooms. And so therefore, materials in one cell can be shared with materials in the other cell. One specific reason why this is important is because there isn't an extensive nervous network inside the cardiac muscle tissue. Therefore, if you can pop one of these cells with a depolarization, that depolarization can sweep from this cell to that one utilizing the gap junction. And so the intercalated disc is almost like an electrical connection, like a plug socket right there. That way, pop the heart in one spot and that signal will then sweep across the heart. So pop a signal here at the SA node and it will sweep across the interconnected cells. Pick it up here, drop it down here, release it again. It'll sweep across those interconnected cells. Here's some quick things about your cardiac muscle that's unique. It really is diverse in the sense that it can use several different types of fuel. It may prefer fatty acids and then glucose and then these almost waste-like products over here. The good news about this is your heart is not directly competing with neurons, say in your brain, for that precious stuff there called glucose. So your heart has to be fueled, it has to be going all the time, so therefore it will pick a second fuel right here rather than the first perfect fuel. Another thing to remember about cardiac muscle tissue is there's a lot of capillaries, more than the normal amount of capillaries you would find inside body tissue. This increases the amount of blood flow and gets the capillaries closer to the cardiac muscle cells, the individual cardiac muscle cells. Also, there's a high number of mitochondria found inside the cardiac muscle cells, approximately 25% of the volume of an individual cell, mitochondria. Also, there's a lot of myoglobin inside the cardiac muscle cells too, so the cell can actually store a lot of oxygen inside. It's kind of a fail-safe system for a momentary disruption of the oxygen levels. There's higher levels of creatine kinase, which is associated with increased ATP generation, and the cell is very much dependent upon oxygen for aerobic respiration. This is its preferred way of getting energy. Therefore, any limiting of the oxygen going to cardiac muscle cells will lead to problems. For example, if you reduce the amount of oxygen in an area, it's called hypoxia. If you reduce the amount of area on the surface of the heart, that's called ischemia. And ischemia will lead to a pain called angina. So, angina of the heart is a warning signal that the oxygen level is going down. If you block the oxygen completely, that's called infarction. And with infarction, you get an MI, a full-blown cardiac arrest. And it's not just a pain, it's a crushing sensation. So, the heart is very much dependent upon a regular flow of oxygen to make sure that the thing is capable of doing its job. Real quickly right here, let's go for the idea, again, autorhythmicity. the fact that the individual cells have their own rhythm, but when they touch, they take the rhythm of the faster one. Here's something else to finish it off. This is a normal graph, of a nerve impulse where there is depolarization, repolarization, everything's reset. You start the depolarization by opening up sodium gates, and the sodium rushes into the cell. The cell depolarizes. Then you close the sodium gate, open the potassium gate, the potassium rushes out of the cell and repolarizes the cell. You then close the potassium gate, and the sodium-potassium pumps put everything back where they were. Now, in this event right here, there was something called a refractory period, which was pretty much right here. That's the most obvious place for it. The analogy we've used is, if somebody tells you to jump into the air, while you're up in the air, you cannot re-jump. You have to land before you can jump again. That's your refractory period, the amount of time in which you cannot respond to a new command or a new stimulus. And here it's fairly short. This is a graph of impulse going through a cardiac muscle cell. Again, you can start the thing off by opening up sodium gates, and you're going to depolarize the cell, turn it on. But then you also open up calcium gates. And it's this additional cation coming into the cell that causes this refractory period to be extended about 100 times longer than you would expect with a, say, skeletal muscle cell. Well, this extended refractory period is called a plateau. And in essence, it's an extended rest period, a time in which the muscle cannot be told to pop another impulse or pop another contraction. So, built-in sort of rest period and called the plateau. But then the sodium gate will close, the calcium gates will close, potassium gates will open, and you'll pump the potassium out, and you'll try to put things back where they used to be. By the way, the calcium that's coming in is from the interstitial fluid, which means that cardiac muscle cells are very much dependent upon the concentration of calcium in the plasma of the blood and in the interstitial fluid. The cardiac muscle does not store the calcium inside like a skeletal muscle would do. Therefore, cardiac muscle tissue is very susceptible to dramatic changes in the calcium levels inside your blood. Another reason why the homeostatic mechanisms that maintain normal calcium levels in your blood are so very important.